Teeth reveal a lot about their owner. For example, their identity, where they grew up, and in some cases even what occupation they had. That's probably more than you'd ever expect. But how is that possible? Look at this tooth. How old do you think it is? A couple hundred years? A couple thousand years maybe? Nope, it's a staggering 1.8 million years old, and it's the oldest human tooth found to this day. If you have a hard time grasping how much time that is, I'll give you a reference point. 1.8 million years ago was around the time when our human predecessors finally started to figure out how to walk on two legs. A lot has happened since then, and this tooth has seen it all. Long after other body parts have already decayed, teeth will still remain intact because they are the hardest substance in human bodies. They can endure a lot of heat, being in freezing cold temperatures, and even being underwater for a very long time. Now that we know that teeth last for millions of years, let's have a closer look at how all the information is extracted. If you have ever watched literally any crime show, you know that teeth reveal a person's identity, either by providing DNA or because they match some existing dental records. Comparing those records is done by looking at dental restorations, dental anomalies, and other unique identifiers. More recently, forensics have started to identify people by using X-rays. One is taken after death and gets compared to ones taken when the person was still alive to see if there is any correlation. But this method has an obvious weakness. If the person got dental treatment in between those two X-rays, there might be no match. So DNA analysis is more reliable, and under ideal preservation, meaning cold and dry environments, DNA can potentially be extracted for thousands of years. In young people especially, it's easy to find out how old they were because teeth break through in a certain order at a certain age. Of course, there will be deviations, but overall, this gives a pretty accurate estimate. But what about older people who already had all their teeth break through? One way is to look at tooth wear. The outer layer of our teeth is called enamel, and we can see how much this layer has been worn down over time. However, an individual who consumes a lot of acidic food like sugar, grains, processed food, processed meats, soft drinks, and even fruits like grapes or blueberries will have more worn down teeth than someone who consumes less of these foods. As you can see, this method is affected by diet and is not very accurate. But don't worry, there is a better way. Once a tooth breaks through, it starts to build 2 layers of hard tissue around the root every year. This is called cementum. When we look at it under a microscope, these layers look like tree rings. By counting those layers and factoring in the age at which the tooth erupted, one can get a quite accurate estimate. Various ways can be used to identify someone's gender. One way is to use optical scanners for measurements of root length and crown diameter, which is accurate approximately 80% of the time. Other ways include examining a certain part of the tooth for so-called bar bodies, which are exclusive to women, and doing a PCR analysis of DNA. PCR stands for polymerase chain reaction and is a method of copying short sequences of DNA in cases where there is too little to analyze. This is done by heating little DNA fragments up to a specific temperature for a certain amount of time. And this process gets repeated many times until there are enough copies of the original DNA. Teeth might also show what job a person worked. For example, carpenters and electricians often hold nails between their teeth, and over time this will show. Bakers and candy makers might have caries on specific places of their tooth due to dust deposits of sugar. Chemical workers might have smooth and polished surfaces because of the fumes they get exposed to. Someone who worked in a battery factory might have yellow or gold-brown stains on the surface of their teeth because of cadmium exposure. Even odd-colored stains can be seen. Iron or steel workers might have bluish stains. The visibility and longevity of these stains depends on intensity and duration of exposure and will be affected by environmental changes, so this information will be short-lived. It's not only occupation that forensic analysis will see, but also habits. People who paint have the tendency to hold the brushes with their teeth, which creates very small changes in shape. This is also true for people who chew on pens or other non-food items. Many of the mentioned changes are not visible to the naked eye and can only be seen through a microscope. Earlier in this video, we talked about how your teeth will be worn down differently depending on your diet. This can also give investigators clues where someone's from because dietary habits depend on the culture and the region a person lived in. Another clue can be how a dentist treated someone's teeth. Did they ever have braces? How were the teeth filled? In certain places, it is still common to fill teeth with gold, for example, whereas in Europe and North America, people tend to get white fillings because they are less visible. This is becoming less and less helpful due to globalization and people moving to different regions of the world. Another way is to conduct an isotopic analysis. I don't want to go into too much detail here, so I'll try to explain it in simple terms. Everything consists of atoms, and there can be different versions of an atom. These different versions are called isotopes. To give you a visual image, imagine multiple pens that look exactly the same from the outside, but each of them has a different colored ink inside. To obtain geographical information, scientists focus on strontium, oxygen, and carbon isotopes. They collect tiny samples from the animal and analyze the different ratios to identify where someone is from. It's important to mention that this usually only gives hints to where someone lived during tooth formation because once the teeth have developed, the isotopes in our animal don't change too much. Obviously, this method will not pinpoint anyone to a specific address, but nonetheless, it can be helpful. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe for more.